Hey, welcome back to the podcast, Porn Brain Rewire, with me, your hostess with the mostest, Dr. Trish Leigh. In today's episode, we are going to talk about you can quit porn. You can. Now, I talk to hundreds, I have talked to thousands of men who struggle with pornography consumption, pornography addiction, whatever you want to call it. And this is what I hear all the time. At my age, insert age, that could be 23, 33, 63, 42. At my age, I don't believe it's possible to quit because I have been watching porn or consuming images for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 40 years, etc. I am here today to tell you, in fact, you can quit. Now, I hope to motivate, inspire, and empower you with today's podcast episode by telling you, yes, you can. You can. But I'm going to tell you how. I'm going to tell you the neural mechanisms behind quitting, why it's possible, and how you can do it. So stay with me because this isn't going to be just a rah-rah session, but it's going to, in fact, include some neuroscience. So first and foremost, let's talk about why you think you can't. Why? So number one, we're going to talk about why you think you can't. Number two, what we're going to talk about is neuroplasticity. It's your best friend or your worst enemy, depending upon how you use it. So we're going to talk about what is neuroplasticity, how does it work, and how can you make it your best friend. And then number three is, that's all great, except for you must know how to use neuroplasticity. So knowing how neuroplasticity works is cool. Obviously, knowledge is power, and knowing how to do something increases self-awareness, which moves you towards self-actualization. But in the end, it's action that makes for change. So there's very specific action steps that need to be taken. There are very specific components that need to be considered, resolved, and rectified before you can move forward. And of course, it's a transformational journey, but if you know the steps to the journey, you get there faster with less struggle, less heartache. So I'm going to share some of those with you today. So stay with me until the end. All right, let's dig in first. What makes you think that you can't quit porn? And obviously, when you listen to these podcasts or if you watch any of the hundreds, there's over 500 videos on my YouTube channel, Porn Brain Rewire, Dr. Trish Leigh. If you watch any of those videos, I encourage you to get a really cool journal and start writing down your ideas. Because we know from neuroscience that when you write something down, there's more of a likelihood that you're going to integrate it, which means there's more of a likelihood that you're going to do it. So get a journal. If you don't have one already, get a really cool journal, get a really awesome pen, and start writing. Okay, so now what makes you think you can't do it? List all those reasons, all those factors. Maybe you've tried before, and we've already dispelled that one because maybe you've tried before but didn't have the right tools. Maybe you don't have the right support. Maybe you're actually not that committed. I talk to people all the time. They're like, I'm calling you because theoretically I want to quit porn, but honestly, I really love it. I don't really want to, quit. That's a commitment issue. And part of my program is getting you to 100% commitment, recognizing that not all people are committed. They know porn damages their brain. They know they want to leave it behind. They know it will be better on the other side, but are they really committed? Not 100%. So that's another issue. So maybe that's something that's holding you back. But this is what I want you to understand. We're going to bust those myths in just a second. Once you write them down, I'm going to have you go through them and bust those myths. And let's get to fact that you can, in fact, quit porn. But what I want you to recognize is what I asked you is what makes you think you can't quit porn? It's your perception of the situation and of the problem, not reality. And we know distorted reality is a really big part of a porn addiction problem. The whole thing gets distorted. And any chronic problem, trust me, I know from my own anguish that any chronic problem leaves your brain in a state where you might get to hopelessness. But we know from scientific literature that when you have pragmatic hope and you believe that once you have the right tools, you will be able to solve your problem, then your problem is in fact much more solvable. So in today's episode, I want you to write down all the reasons you think you can't quit porn. And once you've written down all of those reasons, I want you to go through them and myth bust them, dispel the myth behind them. And I use a technique that I call the three-legged stool to be able to do that. So think of a three-legged stool. I had the most awesome stool. Probably got adiosed in the mold situation, but I had the most beautiful little stool. It was from Pottery Barn. I know some people don't love Pottery Barn, but it was really, really beautiful. It was a wood stool. I'm gonna have to get another one with 3 legs on it. And as long as the 3 legs were solid, which they were on this particular stool, that stool wasn't going anywhere. You couldn't tip that stool over. It was awesome because the legs were so solid. And I want you to think of each one of those reasons that you think you can't quit porn as a stool, a 3-legged stool. And what we're going to do is take one of the legs away. Because if you take one of the legs away from a 3-legged stool, what happens? It topples over. We are going to topple over the 3-legged stools of your excuses that you think you can't quit porn. So here goes. I'm just going to give you a few of them, but you're going to have to apply this to anything you've written down because as we know, there is a very clear kind of avatar to what porn addiction does to your brain and your life, but it's very individualized also. So make sure you individualize this to yourself. So I've already thrown out some of those reasons people think they can't quit porn. Number 1 is I've been doing it for so long and I haven't been able to quit the times when I've tried. That's what I'm dispelling mostly in this podcast is that neuroplasticity shows you can change your brain at any age, at any time. It's locked in by science now. 20 years ago, that was iffy that after the neurodevelopmental period of brain development, which goes until the age of 28 in young men, that after that period, that brains couldn't be changed. Now we know brains can change at any age. And I have helped people in their 80s be able to change their brain, get back on purpose, and live the life that they want to. So even if you're 80, you can do this. Most people are a lot younger than that. Your brain is plastic, it's pliable, it's malleable, it's changeable, it's improvable. That's what we're talking about here. So even if you're older, your brain can change. Boom, leg taken out from the 3-legged stool. That one, check it off the list. We're moving on. The next one is I've tried before and I haven't succeeded. I even made it for 4 months. I made it for 122 days. Did you have the right tools, techniques, strategies, and support? That's the question there. If you didn't have a program that walks you through from beginning to middle to setting a foundation to live in integrity for the rest of your life, you did not have the proper tools, techniques, and strategies. Have you done brain training? If you haven't had one fundamental tool and technique to heal your brain. Take that leg off the 3-legged stool, and I've tried before and I failed. That is only a reason you think you can't quit porn. That is not a reason that you can't. Myth busted. This is fun. I'm having a good time busting these myths. I hope you are too. So think about all the reasons. Those are the 2 main ones. Other people think that their habit is too entrenched. Again, that's a neuroplasticity question. Other people think their issues are too grandiose, or they're too intense, or they've gone outside the screen into behaviors with other humans and it's escalated. Even escalation can be backed out and your brain can be healed. No matter what you have going on, we can help you using these principles. Okay, so go through your myths and bust your myths. It's really fun and it's going to move us through to number 2 is that I've already told you what neuroplasticity is. I'm going to tell you again, but I'm going to share with you how you can use neuroplasticity at any age to improve your situation. Now, here is how it goes. Neuroplasticity is based on something that's called Hebb's Law. Hebb's Law states that Neurons that fire together wire together. So the more you use it, the more you're hardwiring in a particular brain pattern. I call the brain pattern that's associated with porn addiction the pendulum brain pattern. It's one that's wired and tired. Wired with too much fast energy, tired with too much slow energy. And now I know from looking at hundreds of brains that have porn addiction that ultimately what that does is it raises what should be positive energy in the middle. It raises alpha so that your brain becomes stuck in couch mode. It's the pendulum effect that gets stuck in couch mode because of the cycle associated with dopamine and porn addiction. Now, the cycle goes like this. Then we'll get back to neuroplasticity. The cycle is, if you've been consuming porn for a long time, your brain inherently is in a dopamine deficit state, which means that you have increased anxiety and lack of focus in the world from the screen. So if you struggle with anxiety, likely porn is behind it. If you struggle with lack of focus, likely porn is behind it. If you've heard me talk about porn-induced ADHD, this is what I'm talking about, and porn-induced anxiety. We know that that is what happens to the brain because it's in a dopamine deficit state from being depleted from going into the screen. So you have a dopamine deficit, and then the hijacker comes in and he says, I have a brilliant idea. Let's watch some porn. The second you have that idea, you get a dopamine drip. And science shows that when you experience that drip, you have 3 seconds in what I call to pivot in the other direction. And of course, you need a plan because in that moment, you won't be able to do it. You need to pivot in the other direction, or your brain will have to chase down the dopamine deluge. Deluge means flood. The drip begins and your brain will have to follow it, will have to chase it to get to the flood. Neurochemically, that is what's happening in your brain. So once you've decided to watch porn, most people follow through unless they have a plan, proper tools, techniques, and strategies. So if you've experienced that and you're being pulled back in by urges and cravings, stressors, it's because your brain's in the dopamine deficit. It gets the drip, it goes towards the flood. Now, as you set up and you're experiencing your porn session, your brain is in the dopamine deluge. You're getting a flood of dopamine. Now, remember, dopamine is the pleasure-seeking neurochemical. Seeking. So it gives you pleasure, but it's insatiable. It always keeps you coming back for more pleasure. And we know that porn is a supernormal stimulus. It is a pleasure inducer at very high levels, more than typical or healthy, supernormal, more than is better for your brain. So what happens is after the flood, you're left in what I call dopamine drowning. You're drowned out in dopamine. That's what increases all of that alpha in the moment until that drowning goes away, until, the floodgates open and the flood recedes. In that drowning, your brain feels really good, but it increases your lack of focus and your lack of motivation because you've drowned it out in couch mode. But now the flood recedes and you move through the cycle back into a dopamine deficit state. Now, if you are just after that dopamine drowning and you can feel yourself moving back towards life is hard, that's the change point. So if you're there right now, call me. Go to my website and there is a link for a consultation with me. It's a 15-minute consultation. People schedule the consultation at the change point, and I'm so grateful for it because once your brain gets back into the dopamine deficit state, it can be very difficult because all it's looking for is the drip and the deluge and the drowning. But after the drowning is the change point. It comes around in the cycle. So when you hit that change point, if you're not there now, I want you to remember this. There is a change point, and that is the time when your brain will be willing to change. Run to my website and schedule a consultation because I can help you. If you don't want to talk to me, order the 90-day program off my website. It will help you. The program's there for you. I made it for you so that you can succeed. So I want you to know that there's a cycle to this thing. Your brain will cycle in and out of it. But let's get back to neuroplasticity because that's how we're going to break the cycle. So when I say that neurons that fire together wire together, if you keep watching porn, you're hardwiring in that cycle. That's why the cycle's so difficult to break. So if you just stop watching it for a little while, you're kind of loosening the grip on that cycle, but you're certainly not changing it. You're not rewiring your brain. So what needs to happen is we need to change the way that neuroplasticity works. So it's not hardwiring in the cycle of porn addiction. Instead, it's hardwiring in the optimal brain pattern that is associated with your life. So if you've watched my videos, you hear me say, get on purpose in your work, your relationships, and your hobbies. The reason that's important is because if you do that, and there's more to it, honestly, it's not that easy. There's very specific strategies, but if you start to do that and you use the specific strategies, you will now brain hack your brain and you'll break this cycle and you'll create a new cycle where your brain is now looking for lower levels, healthy levels of dopamine from your world. And that's how you succeed long term, is that you rewire your brain to go into your world, into your work, your relationships, and your hobbies to get dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Dopamine, pleasure seeking, but at lower levels, more pleasure, less seeking. Serotonin, the neurochemical of happiness. Oxytocin, the neurochemical of connection to the real world. That's the happiness trifecta, they call it, when you're getting proper levels of those three neurochemicals associated with your life. It creates happiness. That's what I want for you. That's why I'm here on this podcast. It can be yours, but you have to use neuroplasticity as your best friend, not as your worst enemy, the hijacker keep pushing you into the cycle. You can do it, but it has to be unwired and rewired. Those are the first two phases of my 90-day program. They're based on the idea that something called anti-Hebbian learning. Anti-Hebbian, if you stop wiring your brain together in the direction of porn, that's going to help to loosen it up. But then you need to use Hebb's law over here, over on the other side, over here in your life, to start rewiring your brain in the right direction. So let's talk about number 3 for today's podcast is, what are the tools, techniques, and strategies that you must, capital M-U-S-T, know to succeed in the long run? Well, I am here to tell you that it is a collection of many different aspects that I will describe, but it's best to walk through them in a dedicated program like my 90-day program. And this isn't a sales pitch. Trust me, I'm here for you and I really want to help you because the world needs it. I'm here because I want to create a positive ripple effect of change instead of the negative ripple effect that porn has a hold on, the silent tsunami. So I have been impacted by porn and it is my passion. It is my mission. That is why I am here, to help you. So what we need to do is unwire, rewire, hardwire your brain in the right direction. But this is very specific for each person. So in the 90-day program, I lay out all the aspects of unwiring, rewiring, and hardwiring, which I'll skim upon in a second, that you need to do to be able to do the process that I've described, anti-Hebbian learning, Hebbian learning in the right direction. So basically in the unwire section, there's 2 main aspects that need to be addressed. Number 1, you have to stay out of the screen. If you can't stay out of the screen long term, then your brain cannot get healthy. It can't. It cannot even begin to heal if you keep going back in the screen. And from the long sordid saga of a tale of my mold poisoning, tragically, the townhouse that I landed myself in had water damage, and I think it activated dormant mold because I had been getting worse again until I moved to my bestie's guest suite, thankfully. But, I was continued to be exposed to mold. So it doesn't matter what I do. I can't get better unless I get out of a moldy environment. You cannot get better unless you get out of a porn environment, and you have to stay out of it long term. So the unwire section gives you the plan to be able to do that. And there's very specific techniques and strategies and support. When you join the 90-day program, you can include an accountability online group coaching session every other week. Accountability is huge. When you have to look someone in the eye and you have to report how you're doing, it keeps you accountable to using the tools in the program. So unwiring the pattern by staying out. And many times we have to unwire the pattern that was in your brain at the time that you found porn. So most men find porn when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there in adolescence. So what happens is when you found porn in adolescence, your brain actually hardwired itself in a younger version, in a neurodevelopmentally delayed version. And if that offends thee, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. We know that. It increases the slowing in your brain, which is representative of a younger brain in development. So you've been wiring in the adolescent version of your brain pattern for your whole life. So we're not even unwiring a pattern that has been developing over time. We are going to unwire that juvenile adolescent brain pattern and rewire it for your glorious full potential adult self. That's the excitement I have around this program, because that is the real deal. So when you found porn when you were young, there was family dysfunction, there was patterns that you learned to survive. You may have gone into the screen to self-soothe, whatever was going on in your family or at school. Sometimes it's bullying, and I'm sorry for that, because that just sucks on so many levels. There's family dysfunction at all levels. We all have it. It's just a matter of what flavor and magnitude it comes in. And as I look at mine that I tend to talk about and / complain about, the family dysfunction that I had is at such low levels compared to many people out there. So if you have family dysfunction, which includes neglect and trauma and abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, just know that your brain wired itself into a pattern, the pendulum brain pattern, when you were young. It's a survival mechanism. Your brain needed it then, and it needed porn then. But you're an adult now, and we want your brain to grow up into the adult version of itself. Unlock the neuro-rigid, locked-in pattern from childhood, release it, unlock it, let it become more flexible. Let neuroplasticity work for you. So if you don't have the right tools, you won't be able to do that. Brain training is a huge piece of that. Behavioral exercises that help you to explore what some of that patterning is and help you to unlock it. There's techniques in the unwire section of my program. Forgiveness is a really big part of it. And I know, how do you get there? It's difficult, but totally doable. There's strategies that you can use. Brain training, again, is just key. So in the unwire section, we need to unwire the patterning from your adolescence so that your brain can now grow itself up into its full potential. And we also need to unwire the porn brain. Okay, hopefully you're with me on unwire. Number 2 is rewire. Once we've unlocked it a bit, created more flexibility and plasticity, then there's many tools, techniques, and strategies for you to use to rewire your brain in the present. You can capitalize on every moment in the present and use it as your best friend to create the new healthy brain pattern in the middle of calm focus. The zone, the green zone, calm focus in the middle, flow, that beautiful state where everything flows and your life feels good and you're on purpose and you're getting dopamine from the world, so you never, ever will need it from the screen again. That's what we do in the Rewire program. And again, depending upon the frequency, consistency, and intensity of the porn that you've watched over time, this Rewire section might be bigger for you, or you might find more challenges in it. But when you have the right tools and techniques, the challenges decrease and the success increases. So a major portion of the Rewire program, Rewire section of my program, is to rewire your brain using brain training. And what's so cool about it is a workout for your brain. So it literally rewires your brain every time you use the headband. No, you don't walk around with it. You start with 3 minutes and you increase from there. You use it in a neuro meditation session. It's active neurofeedback. You only do it for a few minutes a day, building up to 23 minutes. It's all described in the 90-day program. You're rewiring your brain in the present moments, minute by minute, and it's compounding when you do that, like compounding interest. If you know how compounding interest works, It's the most amazing thing ever that hopefully is going to secure my children's future. It's interest on interest. So it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 formula. It's a one with logarithmic function to it that increases exponentially. So that's what we're talking about here. Brain training and then techniques to continue to rewire your brain in the present. One of the biggest things that I have people do is what I call a brain boosting executive function project. And when you do this project that's outlined in the rewire section, is you do this project and bit by bit your brain is learning. You have to reteach it. This is a rewiring program. You have to rewire your brain to learn to go to the world for dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. For most people, it doesn't happen overnight. But across the course of this brain boosting project, you will see that your brain is healing. You'll see it in the brain training graphs because improvement can be seen with your own eyes. Plus, you'll feel it, of course. But in this way, we can use neuroscience to measure the improvements in your brain performance. And you don't need me to do it. You can do all of this on your own once you've gotten into the 90-day program. That's the coolest part. And of course, we're here for you if you want support. But that is the really coolest part, is that you can improve your brain by yourself. You can measure using data. You can measure your brain's improvement over time using the brain training headband. So very cool. Those are the most important aspects of the rewire section, but there's tons more. There's tons about creating a flexibly scheduled life so that you can get on purpose in your work, your relationships, your hobbies, figuring out your personality type so that you can integrate it to the highest level and prevent disintegration in the hardwire section. Stress is the #1 thing that threatens to throw you back into the screen, because remember, you learned when you were young, porn is the tool to de-stress. It's your only tool in your toolbox right now for most people, or it's one of very few. So when we rewire your brain in the hardwire section, stress management to prevent a relapse ever is very, very important. There's a technique in there for you. And also recognizing when your personality is disintegrating, knowing when the warning signs are flashing and the sirens are going off before you cross that threshold line. And I call it a fault line plan. So you want to know when this earthquake is threatening to come at you to throw you back into the screen. You want to know what your own very personal warning signs are so that you can stay out forever. And we do that in the hardwire section. Of course, I have you create goals for the future. Neuroscience shows people who are on purpose and have goals for the future live 7 years longer than other people. That's how important goal creation is, but you need to know how to do it well. The proper tools, techniques, and strategies. We have a strategy for that. And the importance is tapping into the feelings behind your goal. So our whole life should feel good. Right now, if you're running into the screen or you're being pushed and the screen is ultimately going to pull you, if that's happening to you, it's because you're escaping feelings. You want to escape the way that you feel in your current life. And before we wrap up, I want to remind you, 50% of why you feel the way you feel is porn. It creates the dopamine deficit. So it is just going to push you back in. The brain pattern that it's created in your brain, the seeds of addiction were planted when you were young. And if you've watered those seeds, you've developed a dysregulated brain pattern, one that's less mature and definitely not at your full potential. So right now you have the opportunity of digging up those seeds, chucking them out the window, planting new seeds for the life that you've always wanted. That's what we are on the precipice of. And it is awesome. So I totally hope that you join me in the 90-day program. I come at you with more urgency today because, I've been in my own situation. I've just joined my own program and I'm like, why didn't I do this? It's because I was depending on other people to give me a silver bullet to solve my mold problem. I now realize I have to heal myself using the proper tools, techniques, and strategies that I don't have. I thought I had. I thought I was being given them in the silver bullets. I was not. My journey, not a silver bullet one. Shock me, right? Your journey, definitely not a silver bullet journey. They are the same. Mold is the toxin that poisoned my body. Porn is the toxin that's poisoning your mind. So now is the time. So I come at you with urgency to join my program for you because you need it. If you want to succeed, you got to get in it so we can do this thing together. All right. Please go to my website, drtrishleigh.com. Go to the tab that says Why Porn Brain Rewire. Check it out. All the pieces are laid out there for you. And if you're inspired now, and if not, please come back when you're at the change point. Join the program. Let's crush this thing together. Put this behind you and rock out the life that you want and that you deserve. Join me in the program now. All right. Remember, control your brain or it'll control you. See you next time.